In this video, I'm going to give you my honest review of God of War 2018. That is God of War 4. Subscribe to the Linus Wilson channel. We give you the secrets to crush God of War and God of War Ragnarok. So I want to preface this by saying that I'm 100% in on the sequel, about the Jotnar edition. I just come with this review and I'm using the same criteria that I've used for all my other recent reviews. I know the games that I've played very similar games, and I'm giving you what I think how God of War stacks up. That being said, the weights that I put on these different things are probably different than the weights that you may put on these different things. And so I'm going to have 4 different categories which I'm going to rate it on, and I do think the rating reflects not just the weights that I put on these things, but also just the overall what I think of the game. So remember, if somebody has a different opinion about a game to you, they're not the devil, they're not evil, they just have a different opinion about the game. I also did not get a review copy. I got God of War 2018 as part of a PS4 bundle that I bought myself to play Ghost of Tsushima. So this is no sponsorship whatsoever to do this review. I'm also rating this game in 2022. My philosophy with the ratings is I don't give games benefit of the doubt because they're old. That they have to stack up with the modern games. So my rating for like The Witcher 3 or Horizon Zero Dawn or Witcher 2, those ratings are based on modern day, what you can get in a modern game versus what you're going to get in these older games. So even though God of War 2018 is 4 years old and its sequel is coming out in a few months, God of War Ragnarok, I'm not giving it any leeway that it's 4 years old. And quite frankly, I haven't seen a huge advance in games over the last 4 years anyways. Okay, so my 4 categories are graphics and world, which I'll talk about first, 2 gameplay, inventory and crafting, and story. And I'm going to give them roughly equal weights in the final analysis, and I'm going to grade each one of them. All right, so starting out with graphics and world, and I think this was the biggest disappointment to me. And I'm not saying that the character models for Atreus, Kratos, and the Witch and the Stranger were not wonderful. This, by the way, is a spoiler-free review. So there will be no story spoilers in this. But the problem was that there were too few characters. So if you talk about the total number of characters of humanoid type people that are not monsters, then there were only 6, right? 2 of them were vendors. I guess maybe if we add maybe 8 humanoid type characters. 4 were gods. Atreus, Kratos, and then 2 vendors. And that was it. That was not... So, even though they did a great job, excellent job, top-notch, 10 out of 10 job, there were very few characters. But it was really not the character models that really, set them down, in my opinion. It was the world itself. And so, while the world was a beautiful painting, it was just that to me. It was a 2-dimensional world in many senses. That you couldn't actually... It was not a world that you could go across. You had to go across it in a single line, in a narrow path, all the time. And it was just frustrating and constraining for someone that is used to open world games such as Ghost of Tsushima, such as Assassin's Creed Valhalla, such as Horizon Forbidden West or Horizon Zero Dawn. It felt like a real step backwards in terms of the open world RPG genre, and I don't think you can call it an open world. The only time you really had freedom of movement was when you were rowing on the Lake of Nine in kind of the early to middle game. You get access to the Lake of Nine, and then you can go several different places, but then once you go out of the lake, then you are basically on a narrow path all the time, and you're very narrowly constrained. There's no way that there's not like an alternate route from A to B or C, whereas you could crisscross England however you want to. in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. You could crisscross the islands of Tsushima however you want to within whatever act you're in. So whatever island you're on, you can crisscross it relatively easily. There's basically very few barriers, maybe some hills or something that'll make it more difficult. A similar situation existed with some limitations of like a mountain range and stuff that you had in Horizon Forbidden West or an island, but there was no sense in which the places in Midgard were connected in the sense that you could stray from the path. There was no straying from the path. And so it was really a game design similar to The Witcher 2 from 2011, which I gave an overall B to The Witcher 2 in part because of that. And it was a game design, I think, kind of similar to a more recent title from an indie developer, Kenna Bridge of Spirits, that it didn't feel open at all. It felt closed. It felt like you were always in a dungeon, even if you were outside. And I just don't like that. I like the freedom of the open world, and that's just me. And so for the graphics in the world, I give them a C minus or a 5 out of 10 rating. And that's going to be my worst rating for God of War out of the 4 categories. The second one is its best category, is gameplay. So gameplay, I give it an A, a 9 out of 10. The gameplay was excellent. I really liked how they did the zoom in many of the encounters, such as with the trolls or the ogres, or maybe with the Valkyries. They had or with the stranger very early on, you would have like zoom in to them, and maybe you'd have a particular button. It's kind of like a quick time event, but it made the combat feel more gritty. You had a good balance of ranged and in close in combat, and the runic abilities were also pretty cool. Just a lot. It just felt really gritty and tough and strong, and it was challenging, I thought. So I thought the combat was great. The only reason I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is it kind of goes back to the world design and their kind of whole game design, is that the combat encounters were so scripted that you enter a checkpoint and you have to fight the monsters. There's no really way to avoid the monsters. There's no way to go around the monsters. Maybe you could run away, like you could get in your boat if it was on the Lake of Nine, but there's no way that you could like just go around the monsters, come from a different angle. Maybe you could stealth in. There was no way you could avoid combat encounters. To go to that next part of the map, you're going to have a combat encounter. Perhaps you can run to the next combat encounter, but it's going to happen, and so you just have to do it. You have combat encounter, and that was really, especially in the very beginning of the game before we got to the Lake of Night, that was really frustrating to me. Some people I know love it, the fast-paced nature of it, but to me, it just was like, it was draining. That I like some downtime in the games. I like some time to avoid combat, time to find the combat, and I like to be able to choose it, and you didn't have that choice. And I think a theme of this review is that you lack choice. So graphics world C-, gameplay A, 9 out of 10 for gameplay. Inventory and crafting. So I'm going to give this an A-. This is the second best category to me, 8 out of 10. I thought they had a lot of kind of interesting crafting. It seemed rich. The upgrades were interesting to do. The problem, I think, was that they were a little bit very grindy. So the way that they a lot of materials you couldn't get until relatively later in the game, and even when you had access to them, it just took forever to do the upgrades. So for instance, I've gotten hundreds of thousands of missed echoes. I completed Muspelheim, and I still didn't have enough crafting materials to fully upgrade a Mist set, and I didn't even attempt to upgrade one of the Muspelheim sets or buy one of the Muspelheim sets because the crafting materials were so limited, and by the time I had it for Muspelheim, they were obsolete by other sets. And then the Mist set, I had to grind so many Mist Echoes just to clear out the chamber, and I had to use so many Mist Echoes and so many Muspelheim Embers to upgrade just part of the Valkyrie set that I just didn't. It became just too cumbersome, and I don't remember. I think like the Witcher 3's Wolf School and different Witcher School quests, or Ursine School, I thought those were just brilliantly done. They had new assets associated with them instead of that randomly generated Niflheim grind, or the kind of very grindy Muspelheim. Muspelheim is, you have to get 3 keys after you complete it the first time, and then you get 1 at the end, and it's just, I don't know, it just is not that much fun. I think, both Muspelheim and Niflheim were much better done in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and so to get those crafting materials that you need for those higher level armor sets, it just wasn't. So that's why it doesn't get like a 10 out of 10. It's only getting an 8 out of 10 or A-. I think the other issue that I had with the crafting system, inventory system, right? Inventory doesn't add to weight. There's no limits on inventory. Didn't have to deal with it. So you didn't have any of the inventory problems that the 2018 release of Horizon Zero Dawn did, which was a big grind within that game. And you don't have like the weight problems that you might have in a Cyberpunk or a Witcher 3. Although I like weight-based systems, I don't mind some inventory management as long as it's not too grindy. But there's no inventory management, don't have to worry about it, and that was okay. That was fine. So didn't stop it from getting a top rating there. I think the other issue was that the vendors are just Sindri and Brock. And the other thing is that you cannot sell things, so there's like no one currency. I don't like the trend in games that they have multiple currencies that are not tradable. I get if there's like rare resources or something, a few rare resources, that's fine, but there's a lot of things that are not tradable until later in the game, so you can't buy steel, solid steel, hardened steel, which are kind of more basic resources, or soft Svartalfheim steel. You can't buy those until you get some sort of story progression, so it's a sort of level gating, although I end up farming all those things. But I just didn't, I don't like it when the shops don't really sell things, right? They only do crafting, but there's a lot of resources that they can't sell. And so I really applaud like CD Projekt Red for like putting almost everything for sale in the shops. So the shops are so diverse in Cyberpunk. They're so diverse, and they're also different, and they have different vendors, right? There are like dozens of different character models just for the vendors in Cyberpunk, or in The Witcher 3 has kind of fewer character models, but there are also many different vendors in like Valhalla too. So that's why that's part of why I don't give them 10 out of 10 for that. But A-, 8 out of 10 is good. And then finally, story, which I felt was really weak. So I just listened to an interview with Cory Barlog, the lead developer on the game for God of War 2018, and he said they came up with the ending way at the end of development, that they didn't know where they were going story-wise until the end of the development, and that really just showed through the whole game. So I think that the story was just really problematic plot-wise. There were some feels with Kratos and Atreus, that kind of father and son bonding thing, but in terms of the actual plot, what they were doing, why they were doing it, why the other characters were doing it, it didn't make sense, while the ending kind of tied up loose ends, it felt artificial because it was. It was artificial. They didn't know that was going to be the ending until they realized they kind of had laid an egg, and then they tried to clean it up with the ending. So first of all, the other thing I knock it down for is that there's no choice and no dialogue option. So a lot of games will give you the illusion of choice with dialogue options. God of War doesn't give you that choice. There's no illusion that you have any control over the story in any way, except for, do you accept a quest or not? Do you complete a quest or not? So the core story, so if you just start the game, you'll know that Atreus' mother has died, and we don't really know anything about Atreus' mother. I do not believe that she was introduced in the God of War 1 through 3 from the story summaries that I have seen of those. I've not played those games. But you're supposed to spread her ashes on the tallest mountain. That is, that from the very beginning. And that's just an really odd request. For a mother of her son and husband to send them on a dangerous mission that is totally meaningless from what we can tell, which ends up having them kill 1,000 monsters and fight several gods. That's not what most mothers would do. They would not make such a request that would potentially kill their children or their spouse as their dying wish, right? So you don't get a lot of mothers saying, hey, go climb Mount Everest where there's a 1 in 10 chance of death for me and spread my ashes on the top of Everest, right? Even if that was legal to do. I don't think you can transport ashes to the top of Everest, but that would be, I've never heard of a mother do that. Indeed, most mothers say, do not climb Everest because you might die and we love you so much, right? So now they explain this at the very ending, but I think it's just the whole quest, the whole structure of the story doesn't make sense. And if you get to the very beginning of the game, right, the very beginning, you meet the stranger, and the stranger says, I have to ask you a question. He asked this of Kratos. He never asks a question. We don't know what his question is. He never asks it. And I think the developers didn't know what his question was either. What question did he want to ask? I got to the end of the game. What question did he want to ask of Kratos? Why did he want to meet Kratos? That was never explained. Why did he hunt down Kratos and Atreus? We don't know. I guess I can speculate based on the thing that they came up with at the very end to try to tie up their very poor plot. But you should have motivations for characters that at least make sense, right? Why are they motivated? So why is a stranger motivated to interact with Kratos and Atreus? I don't think that was ever explained. Now, some of the motivations were explained, but and Kratos and Atreus's motives to get involved with all this stuff because they were forced to, because the stranger was hunting them and the stranger's kin was hunting him, I guess. But why were they hunting them, and why? So it's I mean, if you have a plot that is said, well, these stupid things happened because people were driven by fate or forecasts of fate, not by actual motivations, just the fact that it was fated. I don't know. It feels like a really weak plot design, right? So, for instance, in The Witcher 3, which had a very basic plot design, it said, we're going to save Ciri, right? That's our goal, is to save Ciri, my adopted daughter, right? Geralt's adopted daughter. And there are people that are hunting her because she has powers to save their world. And they're hunting her. If they can hunt her down, they can save their world. The Wild Hunt. That's Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. That's the story structure. Okay, so the Wild Hunt has motivations that make sense. Geralt has motivations that make sense. It's a very simple plot, but it works because I think the other issue is the bad guys are not really that complex, right? So the stranger, they try to give him some motivations and stuff. Okay, he's had some bad things happen to him, but now he's just a madman, right? So he's not a complex character at all, and he's probably the most complex villain. And then we have an off-screen villain that Mimir talks about all the time, and he's just villainous in all things. And it just doesn't make sense why he's villainous. This Asgard god is villainous in all things. I think you should have complex motivations, or at least rational motivations, even if they're not good motivations, if they're not like virtuous motivations, but they at least have some rational basis for being evil. I think that would just make the plot a little less comic book and a little more convincing. All right, so that story, 6 out of 10. So if you add up all those things, I think that adds up to 28. Divide that by 4, you get 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 would be a B rating for the game for me. To compare that to other games that I rated, so Horizon Zero Dawn, the 2018 game, I gave that an 8 out of 10. Witcher 2, I gave that a 7 out of 10. Back from 2011 in the Xbox 360 era. For Witcher 3, I gave that a 10 out of 10. For Ghost of Tsushima, 9 out of 10 A, right? 8 out of 10 B plus A minus for Cyberpunk 2077, and 9 out of 10 A for Horizon Forbidden West. I'm hoping for better things for God of War 2022, God of War Ragnarok. I'm not convinced of it because we haven't seen a gameplay trailer yet. We've just seen kind of story trailers, even though they call them gameplay trailers. I think it's going to be very similar to the other game, and that seems to be what the public wants. And so let me know what you think. Please try to be civil in the comments. It's just one man's take. It's not... I don't even give critics scores. I'm not technically a critic. It's just a gamer's score of what I think this game is. I think if you got the game, definitely play it, because this year is really weak. There's not a lot of titles that I think are Bs. That are coming out, that have come out or are coming out in 2022. So besides Horizon Forbidden West, there's not a lot of games that I actually want to play in 2022 besides God of War Ragnarok. So I think God of War would be a good choice to give a try.